Good morning. Continuing from the previous session, let us now examine poem 2 of the longer poem Preludes by T.S. Eliot. Lines 14 to 18. The morning comes to consciousness of faint stale smells of beer from the sawdust trampled street with all its muddy feet that press to early coffee stands. As in line 1, in which the winter evening settles down, line 14 uses personification in its description of the natural world. Now the morning comes to consciousness, meaning people are waking up. The night has passed. It is the next morning. In other words, it is the start of a new day. The word consciousness takes up the implication in line 13, and then the lighting of the lamps, of an imminent breakthrough in self-awareness. But rather than applying this awareness to the city dwellers, meaning people who live in the city, it is the city itself that comes to this consciousness, meaning the city is waking up. It is as if the city wakes up before its hungover citizens. Hungover means जो लोग नशा करते हैं तो अगले दिन सवेरे वो अच्छे से काम नहीं कर पाते हैं, सर में दर्द वगैरह होता है, उस कंडीशन को hungover कहते हैं. So before its hungover citizens who are still asleep thanks to last night's beer. आप जानते होंगे कि बियर भी एक मादक पदार्थ है. द स्टेल स्मेल ऑफ विच लिंगर्स, स्टेल यानी कि बासी, एंड लिंगर्स यानी कि वो उसकी बासी स्मेल या गंध अभी भी मौजूद है बियर की. दिस आइडिया दैट द एनवायरनमेंट इज़ मोर अलाइव एंड अवेयर दैन इट्स ऑक्यूपेंट्स will be developed later in Preludes. It hints at the way that urban life tramples down on people's individuality, even on their humanity itself. The opening lines of poem 2 echo many of the images from poem 1. Here, these are the smells of beer versus the earlier smell of steaks. Steaks आपको मैंने बताया था मीट की एक डिश होती है, खाने की एक डिश होती है, मांस से जो बनती है. एंड द फ्रेज मडी फीट वर्सेस अबाउट योर फीट. मडी यानी कि धूल में सने हुए. ऑन दैट नोट, साइनेडोश once more reduces people to anonymous body parts, their feet charge off as if with a will greater than their owners to early coffee stands. Charge off means rush towards. तेज़ रफ्तार में चल के जाते हैं क्योंकि उनको कॉफ़ी पीनी है. As desperately as wild animals to a muddy watering hole. All of these echoes of the earlier poem further emphasize the repetitiveness of urban routines that are performed unconsciously. The poem makes it sound as if people were machines, and that any sense of freedom and spontaneity has been quashed by urban life. Spontaneity मतलब जो काम या जो कार्य हम अपने आप से खुद ब खुद करते हैं. क्वैश्ड यानी कि दबा देना, किसी चीज़ को ख़त्म कर देना. Ultimately, these first 5 lines of poem 2 reinforce the idea of modern humankind established in the first poem as an anonymous mass acting on unconscious instinct. मास यानी कि जन समूह. यहाँ पर मास शब्द का मतलब है जन समूह. The regular iambic tetrameter emphasizes the repetitive rhythm of trampling feet. Trampling का मतलब है जब पैर चलते हैं तो पैरों के नीचे जो चीज़ आती है वो उसको दबा देते हैं, वो ट्रैम्पलिंग होता है. Line 18 is composed of 3 feet used instead of 4. यहाँ पर feet का मतलब पैरों से नहीं है, यहाँ पर मीटर से है, यानी कि पोएम लिखने के तरीके से. However, as if mimicking the fact that muddy feet come to a halt only once they reach the satiety. Satiety means the satisfaction offered by coffee stands. Lines 19 to 23. With the other masquerades that time resumes, one thinks of all the hands that are raising dingy shades in 1,000 furnished rooms. Before this point, Preludes has been focused on one idea of time, clock time, which organizes modern city life according to a rigid daily schedule. Schedule means routine, या timetable. Basically, people base their daily lives like getting up, waking up, getting coffee, going to work, and coming home on the clock. Here, however, the poem introduces the possibility that this idea of time is simply an illusion. Illusion का मतलब है केवल एक भ्रम है. It does this by calling the daily repetitions that time resumes. Resumes मतलब दोबारा शुरू करना, रोज़ एक ही एक काम को मशीनी ज़िंदगी जीने के तरीके से. A masquerade. Masquerade का मतलब है जब हम केवल दिखावा करते हैं और प्रिटेंड करते हैं. A word meaning a disguise or mask. यानी कि हम सच्चाई छुपाकर केवल दिखावे के लिए कोई काम करते हैं. It is also worth noting that masquerade originally referred to a formal ball यानी कि dance, in which guests wore masks and took part in dances, whose steps were learned by heart. The repetition necessary to do this is similar to the repetitive routines of modern life described in the poem. यानी कि बॉल डांस में लोग डांसेस सीखते थे और समूह में डांस होते थे, जोड़ों में एक आदमी और एक औरत का जोड़ा होता है, और लेकिन वो चेहरे पर मास्क लगाकर, जिससे कि पहचान नहीं सकते एक दूसरे को, वो डांस करते हैं. The use of the word masquerades thus stresses the artificiality of clock time, and as such of all the repetitive actions associated with it. Line 19 is thus a turning point in the poem, a fact embodied by its meter. Instead of following the usual iambic tetrameter or simply being cut short of one or more feet, as in lines 3, 6, 9 and 18, it is formed of 3 trochees, meaning stressed and unstressed syllables, plus an extra stressed syllable dangling at the end of the line, with the other masquerades. Appropriately for a line concerned with reconfiguring notions of time. Notions means ideas. Reconfiguring means दोबारा से उसको एक तरीके से reset करना, and its rhythms. This is the first time in the poem where the iambic rhythm is replaced with a totally different meter. Poem 2 ends on another one of clock time's masquerades, the hands that are raising dingy shades in 1,000 furnished rooms. Yet again, Synedosh emphasizes people's anonymous body parts rather than their distinguished individual features. Dingy का मतलब होता है जो गंदा है, जो मटमैला है और जिससे रोशनी बाहर नहीं आ रही हो. शेड्स मतलब कांच एक तरीके से. This image also recalls the lighting of the lamps that ended poem 1. the people introducing morning light into their rooms are perhaps also set for the introduction of what light typically represents, that is, new knowledge, Naya Gyan. However, as poem 3 goes on to describe, the nature of knowledge becomes much more unstable once the poems transitions from the city's exterior to the isolated interiors, means insides, of individuals' own rooms. Poem 3, lines 24 to 29. You tossed a blanket from the bed, you lay upon your back and waited. You dozed and watched the night revealing the thousand sordid images of which your soul was constituted. They flickered against the ceiling. Poem 3 is the only part of Preludes to focus on an individual person. This person, implied to be a woman from the later references to the papers in her hair, is in bed, alternately sleeping and staring at the ceiling. To better understand what is happening here, note that this is an illusion. Illusion yani ki, I'm sorry, this is an allusion. Allusion yani ki reference. जिक्र हो रहा है या बात हो रही है to a scene from the novel Bubu de Montrais by Charles Louis Philippe. In this scene, a prostitute named Berthe has just gotten up from her unmade bed and say ideas etc. Roughly translated, इसका मतलब है her thoughts lay heaped confusedly in her head. Eliot transforms this ordinary confusion into the hallucinogenic sordid images that flickered against the ceiling. Hallucinogenic means जो केवल ख्यालों में है और जिसके बारे में आपको केवल भ्रम है और आप उससे परेशान भी हैं. एक तरीके से आपको ऐसा लगता है कि कुछ हो रहा है. Sordid का मतलब है dirty या bad. This is the poem's first shift away from documenting external reality to depicting more ambiguous, dreamlike and even visionary spectacles. Ambiguous का मतलब है vague, जो स्पष्ट नहीं है, जो unclear है, जो पूरी तरीके से समझ में नहीं आ रहा है. विजनरी यानी कि एक तरीके से केवल एक दृश्य है जो हम सोच रहे हैं, असल बात नहीं है, वो केवल हमारे ख्यालों में है. स्पेक्टिकल्स का मतलब दृश्य ही होता है. द फैक्ट दैट दीज वेग मीन्स अनक्लियर, अनडिफाइंड इमेजेस कॉन्स्टिट्यूट द वुमेन्स सोल. कॉन्स्टिट्यूट मतलब मेक अप द वुमेन्स सोल. सोल का मतलब हम जानते हैं आत्मा, which is usually considered the most personal and unique part of a person, serves to stress the flattening of individual personality that takes place due to modern life. Her soul lacks any definite features. Moreover, by being described as flickering against the ceiling, like a film being projected, यानी कि जब रोशनी कई बार होता है ना, आप अंधेरे कमरे में बैठे हों और बाहर सड़क पर कोई वाहन आपके घर की तरफ आ रहा है, तो खिड़की से उसकी जो रोशनी, उसकी रात के टाइम का टाइम है और उस वाहन की लाइट की जो रोशनी जो खिड़की से आएगी, तो उसके मूवमेंट से कमरे में वो जो रोशनी वो फ्लिकर करेगी, यानी कि स्टेडी नहीं होगी या स्थिर नहीं होगी. It is as if her soul exists outside her own body. This is a greater degree of alienation than even in poems 1 and 2. This woman is alienated not just from other people but from herself. Alienation यानी कि किसी से दूर होना, किसी के समीप नहीं होना और एक तरीके से भेद आ जाना. The opening lines jolt the reader out of the impersonal tone of poems 1 and 2 by directly addressing them as you. A shift in focus emphasized by the use of anaphora throughout the next few lines. अब पोएट डायरेक्टली शहर में रहने वाले लोगों से बात कर रहा है. एज द सोल एग्जाम्पल ऑफ एन सोल, यहाँ पर मतलब है सिंगल, of an individual described in any detail. This figure becomes emblematic of the lives of all individuals in the modern metropolis. Metropolis यानी कि बड़े शहर. जैसे इंडिया की बात करें तो बॉम्बे, दिल्ली, ये metropolis cities हैं. She is passive, doing nothing in these 5 lines, but lying on her back, वेटिंग, डोजिंग यानी कि थोड़ी नींद लेती है, एंड फाइनली वॉचिंग. दिस कॉन्स्टिट्यूट्स द आइडिया दैट अर्बन लाइफ मेक्स पीपल इनटू पैसिव एंड लिमिटेड बीइंग्स. पैसिव मतलब एक तरीके से इनएक्टिव, जो ज़्यादा कुछ करते नहीं हैं काम और हासिल भी नहीं हो पाता, उनको कुछ ज़्यादा मिलता नहीं है ज़िंदगी में. फर्दर कनेक्शंस टू द प्रीवियस पोएम्स abound in the use of the word sordid, means dirty, which recalls adjectives like dingy. Dingy also means dirty. Grimy, grimy यानी कि मटमैला, that also means dirty. Stale यानी कि बासी, again dirty का meaning है. And muddy यानी कि मिट्टी में सना हुआ, again dirty. From poems 1 and 2. कुल मिलाकर हर जगह गंदगी है, घर के बाहर, कमरे के अंदर, इंसान के मन में. However, aside from the focus on an individual, this poem has another significant difference from the first two, and that is its meter. Lines 25, 26 and 28 all have one syllable too many, यानी कि extra. For example, you lay upon your back and wait id. ये जो लास्ट ed वाला syllable ये extra है. These extra syllables create feminine endings. Evoking means creating the lazy, stress-free state of waiting. Still groggy. ग्रॉगी मतलब जब आप पूरी तरीके से आपकी नींद नहीं खुली है, आप अभी भी अर्ध निंद्रा में हैं, सो भी नहीं रहे हैं लेकिन पूरी तरीके से जगे हुए भी नहीं हैं. एंड हाफ वे बिटवीन स्लीप एंड वेकिंग. लाइन्स 30-40. Lines 30-34. And when all the world came back, and the light crept up between the shutters, and you heard the sparrows in the gutters, you had such a vision of the street as the street hardly understands. Lines 30-32 all begin with and. This use of anaphora, which is also another example of polysyndeton, मतलब जब conjunctions को बार बार यूज़ किया जाता है, यहाँ पर and 2 बार आया है, reflects the state of the woman lying on her bed as she passively, meaning inactively, absorbs the sounds of sparrows in the gutters. Sparrows जो छोटी चिड़ियाएँ होती हैं जिनको हम गौरैया कहते हैं, वो स्पैरोज़ होती हैं. एंड गटर्स का मतलब है नालियाँ, मतलब ये बर्ड्स नालियों में कीड़े वगैरह ढूंढ रही हैं अपना पेट भरने के लिए. अगेन द इमेज इज़ वेरी डर्टी. द फैक्ट दैट द वर्ल्ड एंड लाइट are the subjects of the verbs came and crept further emphasizes the person's passivity. It is only on line 32 that she is the actual subject of a verb, meaning heard, which like dozed यानी कि अर्ध निंद्रा में होना, lay यानी कि लेटे रहना, waited and watched is not a self-propelled activity. यानी कि इन शब्दों से कोई भी किसी भी तरह की क्रिया नहीं जाहिर हो रही है, यानी कि ये औरत लेटी हुई है, कुछ कर नहीं रही हैं. People don't choose to hear things, but will hear whatever sounds there are around them at the time. The rhyme between shutters and gutters is the only couplet in poem 3. Couplet means a stanza of two lines or two lines put together, जिसको हम हिंदी में दोहा कहते हैं. Shutters keep light out, while gutters take wastewater away. The rhyme here helps draw readers' attention to these words and to emphasize the poem's idea that instead of productively absorbing or giving anything to the environment, individuals in the city are fenced off from what is around them. फेंस्ड ऑफ मतलब एक तरीके से बाड़ बनी हुई है, एक तरीके से एक दीवार बनी हुई है, लोग उसके अंदर कैद हैं और बाहर की दुनिया अलग है. The most vivid interactions this character has are her own visions, which are like delusions. Delusions matlab भ्रम. The vision of the street, like the sordid images mentioned in line 27, remains undefined. यानी कि ये पता नहीं है, क्लियर नहीं है कि ये विजन या ये इमेजेस क्या हैं. The fact that the street hardly understands this vision of it implies that the vision is utterly distinct from reality. Distinct का यहाँ पर मतलब है separate. वास्तविकता में और भ्रम में बहुत ज़्यादा अंतर है. Once more, this stresses the theme of alienation, यानी कि दूरी, which separates city dwellers from one another, even isolating them to such an extent that they begin to misperceive. Misperceive means to misunderstand and misunderstand the visible environment around them. Line 34 also establishes, through another example of personification, the idea that the city itself is more conscious and aware than the people living in it, whom alienation has drained of personality. कुल मिलाकर इन लाइंस का मतलब ये है कि शहर में रहने वाले लोग एक दूसरे से शारीरिक, मानसिक और भावनात्मक दृष्टि से एकदम अलग हैं, दूर हैं. उनमें कोई मेल नहीं है, उनमें कोई आत्मीयता नहीं है, इसलिए they are alienated from one another. Lines 35 to 38. Sitting along the bed's edge where you curled the papers from your hair or clasped the yellow soles of feet in the palms of both soiled hands. The unsettling images of this woman sitting on the edge of her bed and holding the yellow soles of her feet in her soiled hands is an allusion to The Leper by the Victorian poet Algernon Charles Swinburne, which contains the following lines. She sitting edgewise on her bed, holding her feet, I sit still and hold in two cold palms her two cold feet, her hair half grey, half ruined gold. This poem, यानी कि The Leper जो poem है, ends with a twist that the lady, who is the speaker's object of affection and whose feet he is embracing, has in fact been dead 6 months as a result of leprosy. Leprosy एक बीमारी है जिसको हिंदी में कोढ़ कहते हैं. Eliot's alluding to the other poem, alluding means referring, यानी कि उसका जिक्र करना, performs two functions here. Firstly, it once more stresses the passivity of the isolated individual. What could be more passive than being dead? Secondly, it adds the idea of disease to the imagery of decay and dirt that crops up throughout the poem. This second idea is also stressed by the description of her feet as yellow, a color associated with bruises and festering wounds. Bruises यानी कि घाव, एंड फेस्टरिंग वूंड्स, वूंड्स का मतलब भी घाव होता है, और जब वो घाव पक जाता है और उसमें पस बन जाती है तो पीला रंग हो जाता है, एज वेल एज सेवरल स्पेसिफिक डिजीज़, फॉर एग्ज़ाम्पल येलो फीवर. यहाँ पर हम ये भी समझ सकते हैं दैट येलो का मतलब पेल भी हो सकता है. पेल मतलब बिल्कुल पीला पड़ा हुआ, क्योंकि ठंड है और उस महिला ने सॉक्स नहीं पहन रखे हैं, तो ठंड की वजह से पैर पीले पड़ गए हैं. It is as if the city itself is passing on a disease to those who live in it. The fact that she is on the bed's edge, rather than standing up or lying in it, stresses the fact that she is in between waking and dreaming states, able to perceive reality, such as the twittering sparrows, small birds, but also experiencing strange visions. The choice to focus on the woman's soiled feet, soiled means dirty feet, गंदे पैर हैं, धुले हुए नहीं हैं, घाव हो रहे हैं उन पे, and hands recalls your feet, muddy feet, and insistent feet, as well as the hands raising dingy shades, the fingers stuffing pipes, and the order to wipe your hand across your mouth. ये इन्वर्टेड कॉमर्स में जितने भी वर्ड्स आए हैं ये पोएम में पहले आ चुके हैं, यानी कि ये इमेजेस रिपीट की जा रही हैं. In this image, the two most essential appendages means extra additions, for living a mobile creative life. Hands perform a huge range of tasks. Feet carry people where they need to go, are reduced to passivity, holding on one another while sitting static on a bed. यानी कि ये महिला कुछ कर नहीं रही हैं और उनके हाथ और पैर कोई भी टास्क या कार्य परफॉर्म नहीं कर रहे हैं. The meter here varies once more. Lines 13, 36 and 37 return to iambic tetrameter, but 35 is as follows. There is a trochee, there is an I am, then spondy, stressed, stressed. Sitting along the bed's edge, where? And line 38 has an anapest. Unstressed, unstressed, stressed, da da dum, I am and spondy, in the palms of both soiled hands. This uneven meter mirrors the idea of this woman being suspended between stable reality, embodied by the regular meter, and wild fantasy, embodied by the exceptions to this meter. Also note the use of enjambment in these lines. The bed's edge where you curl the papers from your hair or clasp the yellow soles of feet in the palms. This further adds to the poem's feeling of instability. The phrases do not match up with the line breaks, creating a sensation of teetering unease as this woman sits on the edge of her bed.